Hey YouTube, it's Jake back with another video, and if you're new here, make sure to subscribe below if you're looking to make millions of coins on FIFA 20. In today's video, I want to talk about Patreons, and as a Patreon owner, I think I can give really unique insight. I know that Nick put out a video and it brought up a lot of conversation around them, and some of us who run them thought about it, and then people who are thinking about joining them might have thought differently about it, so I wanted to give some perspective on it since I'm currently running one and running a pretty successful one. In this video, I essentially want to make it clear to you if you should join a Patreon, what to expect out of a Patreon, and what to look for if you're in a Patreon and may be unhappy with the service. I know you might be expecting this video to be promoting Patreon since I run one, but it's going to be from a neutral perspective, and I'm going to give it pros about joining them, maybe some cons, and then talk about how I don't think all of them are necessarily good. Also, I won't really be plugging mine. Currently, we're sold out anyway, so I'm not looking to fill my spots up. I'm simply just going to give examples from my own Patreon as it's been successful, and I think that we run a really good service. I figured I should start with what is a Patreon. Patreon is essentially a website for content creators to put out content, and it allows supporters to essentially donate to them and potentially get something back. So it's a site to allow you to donate to your favorite content creators. Unfortunately, in the foot community, Patreons have become synonymous with paid trading service. Patreon is a site for all content creation, and it wasn't developed for FIFA in any means at all. Sadly, it's just from people following trends and not thinking on their own, because I don't think it's optimal to necessarily be running your service through Patreon in the first place in some circumstances. Firstly, Patreon is a US-based site, so if you're using it as your platform and you live especially in Europe, it's really tax heavy, and I've seen the numbers on that, and if I were you and you're running any kind of paid service, I wouldn't use Patreon. They take too much taxes from you. It's not good for parties over there, so I would essentially look at other platforms, Discord, or even creating your own website. I know FootSpy created his own site this year, and he's had a lot of success with it, and I'm really happy for him. I think sometimes people mistakenly associate the website for having success, and although people know what Patreon is and people know what that site is for in FIFA, if you're a really good content creator, people are going to support you as an individual. They're not looking to go to Patreon. They are looking to say, I want to team up with him. I think he gives really good advice, or I really like his content. I'd like to work with him. You definitely don't have to use Patreon, so be creative and at least look around at other options. Don't just follow trends and get on bandwagons, because that's not going to make you stand out, and sometimes it's not even optimal for you. In FIFA-related Patreons, there's often a tier-based system based on donation level. So essentially, if you donate $5, maybe you get 5 guides a week. If you donate $10, maybe you get Discord access. If you donate $20, maybe you get all those other things, and then access to that person's DMs. And I do want to touch on this for a second because it's actually something that bothers me, and I don't think that that should be included as part of your paid service. Personally, from my experience, I have open DMs on Twitter and Instagram and of course Discord, and I don't feel like people should have to pay extra to talk to me. I know that my approach may differ from a lot of others, but I want to learn about people and who they are as individuals and then talk about foot. So a lot of our Discord is based around friendly discussions, and me having conversations with people one-on-one is part of that, and I don't think I'm valuable enough to be charged extra for, so that's not ever something you'll see from me, and I actually dislike it in a service most of the time. I know it takes time to respond to all DMs and everything like that, but if you're running a paid service, I do hope you have time to answer your paying participants. I think this year, as of FIFA 20, there are over 20 Patreons, and that's just simply from the community I'm a part of and that I know. I'm sure there are other Patreon services, honestly, in other countries with languages that I don't speak very well, so 20 is an absolute minimum. So let's say there's 25 plus services, and it can really be hard to disassociate good and bad ones. As someone currently running a successful Patreon, I wanted to give some tips that I've discovered along the way and something that you might want to look for and watch out for if you're looking to join someone else too. The first thing I would check is how many Patreons are subscribed to that particular individual. Patreon count doesn't necessarily pertain to content, but if you've developed a brand and you've developed really quality content for free over a long period of time, I can almost guarantee you that people are going to look to sign up with you. If you've proven yourself as a trader, if you can speak intelligently and knowledgeably on topics and you've proven that for a long time before starting anything paid, why wouldn't you have at least 5 or 10 people signed up with you? So again, if someone has less than 10 people, it doesn't necessarily that they mean that they don't put out good content, but it means they probably didn't take the right approach leading up to Patreon and their information isn't as well known about. In my opinion, everyone should start for free and they should really build up their base of knowledge and showing examples to people. So a few ways to do that are guides, and you can make guides on any platform. You can associate it with Twitch, you can associate it with Twitter, Instagram. People love them. I mean, the simplest information gets retweet and likes and follows, and I pretty much refuse to put out simple or crappy information personally. I feel like if I was to make a guide saying invest in 83s, I would be doing it for follows, and that's never was my intent. I want to put out really solid information that's well beyond the norm. So I'm hoping that people that discover my social medias discover that in me, that I'm catering to a more mature audience and to an audience that wants to learn a lot and is not just looking for basic investments. On top of that, you could also become known graphically. You could become really good at graphics and present them on Twitter and Instagram and at least blow your page up, and people can get to know you and people can see what kind of content you put out, because that's important and relevant to people as well. They want to get to know who they're working with and if you can be trusted and how hard you work on your stuff, and that can pertain to graphics too. I think the next step is starting some kind of free service that kind of mimics a paid service. So Discord is an awesome option to do that in. If you can successfully run a Discord for a few months and are providing great tips, how many of those people might come over to join a paid service? I would imagine it's a good amount if you're priced accordingly and if you're providing good tips in that free service as well. I think we'll see that really soon in FIFA 20. You'll see a ton of pages that are starting Patreons right now and that have less than 10. You'll kind of see them dwindle out because essentially I don't think they've built up things enough to run one. And I think they'll discover that when people simply aren't signing up, they should probably move back to free content, even if they've done it previously, to build up that demand. For me personally, I know if I was running something paid, I'd want to make sure people are going to utilize it and were interested in it before I started. One thing to look at if you're running a Discord or Patreon, or if you're looking to sign up for them too, is simply the age of the person you're working with. I can't imagine many 16 and 17-year-olds have run their own business or worked a lot in their lifetime, so they might not know necessarily how to value people's times, and they might not have really good written and verbal communication skills. So I think that's really relevant on teaching people to learn how to trade and some of those advanced methods too. So I think that their age is really important, and they might be pretty young, and I've spoken to 17-year-olds that are really mature and smart and well beyond their years, but you should also know what you're getting into if you sign up with someone who's really young and that may be looking to make that quick dollar.
Hello, I like money.
I think the next thing to look at for a paid service, and this should be listed or associated somewhere with them, is mods and support. Mods and support is extremely relevant to how successful the Patreon will be. If I was running the Patreon all by myself and the Discord, it would fail. I simply can't be on as much as I would like to be throughout the day. I have a life outside of FIFA and I love it, and I need to spend time with my wife and my family and my friends. So I need help when I'm not available for periods of time. And for me personally, we have mods that are in the social media world, and you guys may know them. I'm not going to say names because it's not too relevant to the video. And then I also have mods that I've built up from the Discord itself. So some people in my Discord have been in it 3+ or 6+ months, and they have quite a few people have 20 million or more coins and 60 million plus TP transfer profit, and the highest people in the group are in the top 100 leaderboards. So I'm really, really confident that when I'm away, those people can at least help answer questions. They can even give tips if I'm away from the internet for long periods of time. I know Nick recently mentioned this in his video, and he talked about transfer profit and how that associates with a Patreon's level. And I kind of wanted to give my take and what I think you should look for as someone who may be looking to join or in one. Personally, in my opinion, you don't have to join someone who's in the top 100 leaderboards. It does give them a little bit of an edge, and it's more of a flex. But that doesn't necessarily pertain to knowledge and how well they can explain things, and it doesn't necessarily even relate to their trading ability. Let me explain. I could get more into this in the future, but I simply want to start by letting you know I don't think the top 100 leaderboards are a huge deal, and I think it's actually getting moved further and further away from being a skillful thing. This year more than ever, people are going to be loading up FIFA points, and people may or may not be honest about what they're using. On top of that, if you look at the FIFA 19 leaderboards, especially on Xbox, the Xbox leaderboards probably have 10 or 15 people in the top 100 that are actually FIFA point spenders, and I mean huge, like $4,000 to $10,000 worth. So they're top 100 traders, right? Should they want to run a Patreon? No. I really don't think that there's a good formula to find trading ability in FIFA, so people are reliant on the top 100 transfer profit leaderboard to try to get some kind of significant achievement to flex, really is what it is, in their bio or to tell people about. And yeah, it matters some, but my point is, whether I had 100 million transfer profit and spent an hour a day, or I had 150 million transfer profit or 200 million and I put in 2 or 3 hours a day, what difference does that make? Just because if someone flexes top 100 in their bio or on all their social media, it doesn't necessarily mean they can teach you that well. And if someone has, say, 75 million, maybe they can teach you extremely well. It does vary per person. With that said, I do think that there's a minimum pretty much requirement for Patreon owners to have, and I would say that's 50 million transfer profit. That's just an opinion. I don't want anyone to get harsh on me if they have 40, and I'm not coming at anyone specifically. I'm just giving an opinion there. To me, having 50 million transfer profit means you practice what you preach, you're on the game quite a bit, you're not solely relying on Footbin, and you're using your own logic and knowledge and implementation of those tools to gain coins. I know you may have done it in years past, or people might have said, oh, I got top 100 in FIFA 17, but the game changes every single year. There are trends and analysis you have to do while being on the market that you can't just use Footbin for, and you can't just imagine. Just one quick example of this is simply if you're trading with icons and you're using the graphs on Footbin to choose their high and low points, it may not be very accurate. They're too rare on the market. You really have to see what's selling. Also, you would think that certain icons that only have 1 or 2 on the market are selling at top price because that's what Footbin lists. So you have to really trade with some of these cards and implement those tactics to know. And if you're doing that, and if you're a really good trader, even if you spend like an hour a day for, the first few months, or at least to like February, you're going to have 50 million transfer profit. And it means you really enjoy trading as well. And I think that you should be spending that time if you're giving that advice out. That's just my opinion, but it's something to watch out for. Next, I want to talk about group size and what kind of group size you should look for in a good Patreon. I know I said earlier that you should probably monitor it and make sure that people are signing up or staying because they like it, but I think there are some differences between what's a good group size between each Patreon and each owner. First off, it's how much content are you putting out and how many suggestions are you giving. If you're telling people to all invest in 1 to 3 cards at a time and you have a 100-person group, you might artificially inflate those prices, and it probably wouldn't be a great tip to give to hundreds of people. It also depends on if you're sorting it by console. If you're using Discord, which most people do that run them, you can have people select consoles and you can start weighing it out that way. So maybe you do 100 people, but if all 100 people were on Xbox, that would have a much different impact than if they were on PS4 or even divided. Typically, you'll get a split, and that ratio is typically related to more people being on PS4. I would say it's around like 60-40 or 70-30 towards the PS side, just because there's so many more users. Personally, I've experienced this, so I can say it. Having 50 people per console literally would have no impact on the market. If you have 50 people per console on the market, and you're a Patreon owner, you should be at least giving prices associated with your investment. So, for example, if you say, I think Socrates is going to rise because I expect to see this SBC come out, try to buy them at 4.6K or under. If you're associating prices with your investments, that should essentially monitor over-investing and investing at high prices and artificially inflated prices. Your group should essentially know that they have to wait, and they can't all go buy at once, and if they have a list of cards, they can kind of cycle through them and pick up ones that are on their lowest or cheapest points. I think that having 20 to 50 people in a service would be fantastic. I think it sounds good, it's a good idea, but it doesn't really work out that way, and it doesn't work that way actually more so for the content creator. I want to explain to you guys just how the math works and just being really straightforward on prices and things like that. For example, if I had 50 people join my Patreon at $20 a month, that would equal about $1,000. And it sounds good, right? It sounds like a lot. Oh, you're earning $1,000 playing FIFA. But with a group size that big, at 20 to 50 people, I would be posting specifics. I would be responding to DMs. I would be posting still my long articles on Patreon itself. And which probably still equate to like say 20 hours-ish a week if I'm performing the service optimally. At 20 hours a week and earning $1,000 for the month after what Patreon takes and taxes, you're probably making like next to minimum wage. So at some point it's got to be feasible for the business owner. For the business owner, you should be getting value out of your time. And at that small of a group, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. On top of that, I think it's really important to remember that not everyone in your Discord is going to be active. I know for us, we have a 300 plus person Patreon, and the Discord is manageable and it's not crazy, and sometimes it gets a little bit hectic, but I can always catch up on messages, and it's simply because some people don't love to talk in it. They just love to get the tips and then they're on their way, and that's just fine. The community is something that's optional and interacting is something that's optional. So it's important to remember not everyone is going to get involved in the chat. I kind of mentioned this one earlier, but essentially how much support you have also pertains to group size. If I was running the service as an individual, I couldn't make it so big because I couldn't be as active, and the messages would overflow and the questions asked would go beyond my reach. But since I have a 10 plus person team helping me, it works out really, really well. The other thing I would look for is simply just trial and error. I would ramp up your Patreon and start lower and see how it feels and see how it affects the market before you start building it. I know personally, when I started Patreon, ironically, we started last October, I want to say, and we capped at 20 people. I wanted to see, for one thing, what it was. I started Patreon because people asked for it. I had never heard of the site. I had never used Discord, and I wasn't familiar with teaching people in such detail how to trade. So I wanted to make sure people were enjoying it and that it went well, and then I could ramp up my service from there. And I'd recommend doing the same. You don't have to do it on such a small scale, or you can go with whatever you feel is best, but don't just start out and say, okay, I'm going to have 100 people in, because 100 people might be really overwhelming off the bat. As of September and maybe even October, I don't believe you need a limit on your Patreon. And I simply say that because if you're giving out investments in those first few months, or definitely in September, there's really next to no way you're going to inflate the market, especially if you give prices. And that's simply because people just don't have enough coins. If I shout even to my group to buy a few cards, they might take a few cards off the market, but then they might be out of coins. You know what I mean? Like, people aren't going unassigned generally on hundreds of cards in that first week or first couple weeks, just simply because they don't have the coin total to do it. And if you do, you are part of Credit Card FC probably. This is where it's important, I find, that people even stick to their word and are honest, and it shows kind of how they're trustworthy. For me, I told my group we cap at a certain number, and we hit that number, and I capped it. I capped it due to wanting to host a really good community. At some point, having too big of a group not only can hurt investments, but it can really hurt the community component as well if people can't read the messages, if they can't find what they're looking for. So if you set a cap, keep it. If you extend it, it doesn't look so good, and people can notice that. One thing that I heard that I strongly agree with is that people should aim to learn enough to leave the Patreon. You might say that's ironic because that's not a very good business model, but I think that that's true. I think that people shouldn't feel the need to stay, and you should be giving them the tools to leave and do this on their own for years to come. And that's why we say it can save people money on FIFA points. So, for example, this is how the post could differ from you wanting to kind of make sure people continue coming back to them learning and leaving. And if they leave, that's okay because they've learned enough. Say you're looking to invest in 80 for Lala, and you know that he's going to go up for Thursday due to people getting rewards and getting that influx of coins. Maybe you just tell people to buy him, and that's it. Maybe you just say buy Lala at 40k PS4 and 35k Xbox, he'll rise. That kind of advice doesn't really help anyone. They get nothing out of it. Some people would prefer it. They just like being told what to do for convenience, but other people that are willing to learn should have that component as well. So if you're a Patreon owner, make sure you're giving specifics to people and reasoning and logic so that they can build up that knowledge base. And if you're not, you're really doing them a disservice. I think here it's important to remember what Patreon is. And Patreon is a site to support content creators. After Nick's video, I actually went to my group and I said, just out of curiosity, how many people feel like they have learned enough about trading that they could leave but choose to stay to support me as a content creator and for our community, or they want to help teach others. And we have a group of 300 plus, and literally 80 of them selected that they don't need to be here. I feel really, really fortunate and blessed to have a sold out group. I think we have become the most in demand service in FIFA 20, and that's from the great community we have. It doesn't have a ton to do with my trading tips. I wish I could take credit for all of it, but I'm extremely fortunate for the group we have in there, and I want to make that really clear. And I hope that people get the opportunity to build those kind of communities around foot. Let's talk about if Patreon might be a good fit for you. First, I want to tell you the truth, and I want to say this explicitly. You have no obligation and no need to join a Patreon. Sounds weird because I own one, right? Not very good business, but it's just the truth. So Patreon is a service industry just like any others, okay? When you think of the service industry, you might think of a personal trainer. Do people need a personal trainer? No. They're using it for convenience so they don't have to think about their workout, accountability, and their expertise so they can get to their goals faster. Patreon should work that exact same way. And in reference to foot, this is how I feel it should work. People should constantly know what investments to make and what to do. If they work really long hours or long weeks or have kids, which I have parents in my Discord, if they want to hop on and make some coins, I should be able to give them multiple ways to do that. Also, something to look for is essentially how fast you can learn. There's tons and tons and tons of great free content now. Don't get me wrong. I try to put out great free content as well, but Patreon should go a step beyond that. And I personally am 100% confident that joining my Patreon would teach people faster than any free content available. I'm really confident in my service. I think I can teach it well. And if you're running a Patreon, you should feel the same way. If people are paying for your service, you need to give them something exclusive and something that's value for money. If they don't feel like they're learning faster than what they could get for free, then really they shouldn't sub to you for tips or anything like that. Because there's such a misconception around Patreons, I did want to finish this video by posting a few examples from my own posts. They're in the past, they're previous, but I wanted to spend a second explaining them and just show you how I display my content. Everyone's unique, and I'm not saying it's the only way to do it or the best way to do it, but since there's such a misconception and people think there can be such bad service, I at least want to show what I'm putting out because I'm confident in it. This first post here basically just contains some League One investments. Essentially, it was right before League One Team of the Season, and the Team of the Season cards became essentially so expensive that people would get some of them in their red player picks, but they wouldn't be able to afford all of them. So they would go link them in with League One special cards like Lala and people like that you see on the post. And then I listed some Thursday flips. I'm using this post in particular because I know that a couple of those cards doubled that week and they made 200% of their coins. So I thought that was awesome, and it's a good example of how I'm trying to give reasoning behind it and how I'm listing specific prices for them to aim for on both consoles. Next, I wanted to show you an example of a concept that's actually really, really hard to explain. I haven't seen it done very well anywhere, and I think that not many people try it because it's risky, and not many people truly understand it. And that's part of what I try to put in my group, because if it's exclusive, it does make it better and it makes it unique. So this concept's just on overnight flips. Overnight flips essentially pertains to promos, and during promos, essentially packs launch Friday at 6 p.m. containing new players. So let's think of like Foot Future Stars, for example. Promo packs and lightning rounds come out at 6, 7, and 8 UK. Sometimes you'll see a 9 or NA lightning round, but those are always for sure 6, 7, and 8 generally. As the packs are open, the prices of these new cards come tumbling down, and they come down for a while. Well, eventually all the cards have to hit a bottom point, and when they do is often when Europe is starting to fall asleep, which tends to be around like, let's say 11 to 1 a.m., especially on that Friday night because it's a weekend. But then when Europe wakes up, cards can go up really heavily, and I'm talking like 10 to 30%. And if you understand that and understand what to look for in a criteria of cards to choose from, you can make a ton of coins literally overnight. So that's a pretty unique concept and not one that people know about. In review, I would simply say that a Patreon is right for you if you're looking for convenience, if you want investments handed to you, if you're really busy, if you have a really demanding job or kids, or you're not on the game as much as you want, or you want to use that time on the game, particularly playing through gameplay, and you don't want to trade or learn how that much. So there should be a huge convenience factor. You should also be getting information that's far beyond free content. If someone's posting content you can find for free everywhere, then why would you join them? I mean, if you really enjoy them as a person, that's okay, but make sure you're getting some content that is exclusive to you. On top of that, you should feel like you can learn really, really well from them. I mean, the goal would be to learn faster than any free information out there. You need to provide that in a really good service, and people will keep coming back for that. I do want to confirm and say again that Patreons are completely optional. They're not for everybody, and there are a lot of bad services out there. So I hope you can use some of these tools to help identify the good ones. I also wanted to say thank you, and I wanted to thank the people that are currently in my Patreon that are allowing me to have an income from FIFA, which is something I love, and that's allowing me to put more time into content creation. And on top of the Patreons, thank you if you're watching this video. Me having media platforms to speak on trading is what allowed that to grow, and it's only going to get bigger because having that income and having income from FIFA allows me to put more time back into it, like creating these YouTube videos. So I really appreciate each and every single one of you. I wanted to simply end by asking a question saying, are you in a Patreon and do you enjoy it? Don't use any names, not trying to get anyone in trouble. And are you thinking about joining one? If you're undecided and you don't know maybe whose is good or whose is bad, you can hit me up on my social media. The links are in the description, and just simply ask me. And since mine's sold out, I won't even be talking about my own. I'll be talking about others that I think put on a really good job. I truly hope you found this video informative, and if you did, make sure to press that like button and subscribe down below if you want to make millions of coins this year, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Peace!